All right. For today's interview, I'm here with Michael Cody, a Chicago based director and theater maker who has worked across the Midwest at theaters like Nebraska Rep, Illinois Shakespeare Festival, Youngblood Theater, one of my favorite theaters, actually. And Cody is also the founder and creator of Enough Plays to End Gun Violence, a project that calls on teens to confront gun violence by creating new works of theater. The project has sparked three published collections, as well as numerous nationwide readings and nights of theater across the country. Michael Cody, I'm so glad to have you here. I love the collections. How are you?
I'm doing great. It's so great to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
No, absolutely. Well, I mean, like, these collections of theater are so amazing. You're the founder and the creator of Enough. Let's start off just by telling the people, if they don't know what it is, what is Enough and what is like the mission of this project?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Enough Plays End Gun Violence calls on teen writers across the country to write short 10-minute plays that confront the issue of gun violence. What we end up doing is we select a handful of those plays, this last time it's been six, to be produced by theater companies, schools, community organizations all across the country on the same evening. And
Mhm.
those evenings are meant to be opportunities for that community to engage on the issue, to talk about how gun violence impacts their community specifically, to partner with local nonprofits that are working on the issue,
Yeah.
and really have the conversation about gun violence and its impact on their own terms and
Yeah.
not in the immediate aftermath of a horrific event, which seems to be the only time we end up talking about this issue.
That's so true.
So it's been an amazing and kind of unprecedented way of providing a pipeline for teen writers
Mhm.
to get paid, published, and produced from their submission all the way through the volumes that PlayScripts ends up publishing.
That's amazing. I mean, it's an awesome opportunity. What made you like come up with this idea to like bring this opportunity to teenagers and how I feel like as a theater artist, it would have been so easy for you to say, "Oh, this is an idea I have. I'm going to create it." But it's I mean, it's one of the only projects I've ever seen of somebody you're really curating things written by the people that are most affected by this thing. What gave you that idea and kind of how did this project like start? Like where were the beginnings of it?
hmm I mean, Justin, you absolutely nailed it. So, the initial seed for this went back to Parkland.
Yeah.
So I was in rehearsal and the news of Parkland broke through. Someone had it on their phone. Everybody was pissed off. Nothing never changes in this country. It always gets worse. This is terrible. And then, like, we kept rehearsing the play.
Yeah.
and and I was an assistant director in this room,
Mhm.
so I had a lot of time to just sit and think. And I was like, this is how we always respond, isn't it? Like, these things happen, we have a big emotional reaction to it, we feel hopeless and helpless and angry, and then we just go back to
To work.
daily life. Yeah, we go
Yeah.
back to, like, the moment before,
Yeah.
right? And instead, these should be inciting incidents. These should be moments that change us to do something. So I sat there, I was like, okay, there has to be a theater response to this. I mean,
Mhm.
theater is so we always kind of gripe about how there's no money and it's hard to get audience, blah blah blah. But we're so resourced in the sense that we create community
Yeah.
and we have spaces and we talk about all sorts of issues through the lens of stories. We should be doing something on this. My initial thought was like, all right, I know what we do. We we commission the biggest writers, Avengers level quality caliber
Playwrights.
team of writers.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we get them to write plays. And then we do it all across the country. I knew that was part of it. Like, we need a act of solidarity. And I thought about it, some conversations about it, didn't really seem to go anywhere for some reason.
Mhm.
And I talked to a mentor of mine, Michael Rode, who is on our advisory council, and he's like, I see what you're trying to do, but that's kind of boring. He's like, those writers, they have platforms. If
Yeah.
they want to write about this issue, they can and they should.
Yeah.
But who is not having an opportunity to have their voice heard? And I sat with that feedback, and then I looked at what came out of Parkland. March for Our Lives, Students
Mhm.
Demand Action, all these young people making everybody pay attention and keeping the conversation alive and actually making progress. And I was like,
Mhm.
that is who needs to be at the center of this. So it took sort of almost a year-long process of me kind of, like, having it on the back burner,
Yeah.
and then in 2019, there were these 2 back-to-back mass shootings in Dayton and El Paso.
Yeah,
Like, within
absolutely.
24 hours, like, all these people got killed. Like, in Dayton, it was, like, 40 seconds,
Yeah.
and all these people were killed, and I was like, "You know what? I'm here. I have this idea. It's sitting in my Google Drive as like a document that only I've seen,
Yeah.
and it's no one else is going to do this right now. So it's I have the responsibility to get this out to as many people as I can." And then I spent that entire fall and the time before the pandemic really broke out, emailing every person I ever knew or could meet in theater. I mean, I found every theater in TCG and emailed every artistic director and
Yeah.
education head, um, and just called in every favor to try to make this work.
I mean, that's amazing. I mean, you talk about an inciting incident, and that was actually a part of my next question, but you kinda hit it on the head as, like, a call to action to people, and it's so amazing to hear about your inciting incident and your what was your call to action to create this piece. You talked about how these nights of theater can involve not just schools, but, like, it can involve creating a dialogue with anyone who's been affected by this situation. Talk about, like, the inciting incident that you talk about at one of the letters that you wrote at the top. I forget which volume, but at one of the tops of the volumes, you talk about an inciting incident, and you compare it to, like, the call to action within theater. What do you think is, like, the stipulation or the call to action of performances of this show? What do you think people can be striving for or doing when they take these plays that you've curated and you've helped bring up? What are things that people can be doing other than just giving someone a program and showing them play and then walking away?
Yeah, this has become more and more important with the project. I mean, I
Mhm.
certainly knew from in our first go around about it that these were opportunities for communities to have real impact. But
Absolutely.
as we've gone on, the communities have taught me so much about the potential of the project. So I'm going to tell just a really brief story. So
Please.
in 2020, we were really looking. We're trying to get every state. Every year, we're trying to get every state involved in the nationwide reading.
Yeah.
We've yet to hit 50, so it's still a goal of ours. And we were looking for a place in Indiana. And I got connected with South Bend Civic Theater,
Mhm.
signed on at the last moment, and they decided to partner up for the first time with an organization called Connect to Be the Change. Connect to Be the Change is founded by two mothers who had lost kids to gun violence.
Mhm.
Loria Perez is actually a mom who lost two kids to gun violence, and they work with youth in their community as change agents. So disrupting violence, being good role models, just trying to break that cycle of violence. And so they worked with Connect to Be the Change for the first time. This is a great excuse
Yeah.
or vehicle to do that. And
Absolutely.
they worked with their teens to be in the plays. And this is 2020, so it's the height of the pandemic. Everything's digital, and these they had this great experience. They had a digital conversation with the mayor afterwards of South Bend, and telling them these young people telling the mayor like, "Hey, you should be doing more." It's kind of
That's
awesome to see.
awesome.
So then, fast forward to our next nationwide reading. In the interim time, Loria is now the guest services manager at South Bend Civic Theater. So she's working for the theater.
That's so
Um,
awesome.
I know it's incredible, right?
Yeah.
And then Loria is directing the plays in the 2022 reading, and she's casting not actors but survivors from her network that align with the stories of the plays. So she's
That's
bring
amazing.
yeah, and then 2023 comes around.
Mhm.
They've teamed up with schools, other nonprofits. They start the day with a community dinner where survivors and audience members have a meal together. Then they
That's
marched through South Bend and held a rally on the courthouse steps, and the mayor came. And then the end of the evening was the plays and
was the
presenting the
plays.
plays. And then this year, we're kind of in this off year in 2024. we're going to come back to the cycle in 2025.
Mhm.
But they're like, you know what? This is too important. We're going to have our young people generate plays. We'll submit them later to enough, but we're going to generate them in the community and we're going to do a reading of our kids' plays this year.
That's amazing.
So, like, this is the gold standard, right? Like, this is
Yeah,
like, this is premium engagement and
yeah,
the kind of engagement every theater I think in the country wants to see on their projects. Um,
absolutely.
but for me, it's an example of, uh, people want to be talking about this issue. People want to be engaged in this issue, and when people come to experience these plays, the plays are so good and they're
Yeah.
so extraordinary and thought provoking that I've seen audiences being like, "Okay, what do I do now? What do you want me to do? Like, you've got you. I'm emotional. This is hit close to home because it's not just a statistic or a headline. I see my kid on stage doing these plays, and
Yeah.
now gun violence is not a distant issue for me. It's right here.
It's right here.
So these are priming events. These are
Yeah.
priming individuals, and I get the I get the cynicism that I get sometimes on the project is like, well, are you really reaching the people you need to reach? Because like, are you really reaching people who are on the other side of the issue and are really hardlined about nothing can infringe on gun rights,
Mhm.
right? And I'm like, I don't know. I don't know if those people are self-selecting to come to this event,
Yeah.
to be open-minded. But I think that's not the audience. I think the audience is people who care about this issue, who think
Mhm.
about it a lot, who would be pissed hearing about it in a rehearsal hall, looking at their phone, but that instead of just going about their daily business, we intervene and
You
give
actually
them
do you say it's been enough.
it. We say it's been enough, and we encourage them to use this as a moment to take the path of action. Because
I love the story of how this was created because you really are giving a voice to the kids who are most affected by this and usually would be voiceless in this situation. As much as I would love to see a collection of plays written by my dream Mount Rushmore of playwrights written in a theme. That's awesome. It's so wonderful to read these, and I want to give a quick shout out to the six playwrights for it's either soon to be published or recently published. We're recording this episode a few months before release, so I'll let everyone know before and after when Volume 3 is officially getting published. But Nyara, Amanda, Pepper, Sam, Justin, and Valentine are the six playwrights for this upcoming volume, and they're absolutely wonderful. I got to read it beforehand, and it's amazing. I wanna know, like, the decision to have teenagers submit and create these collections so you can not just jumpstart their playwriting careers and give them an opportunity to be published at such a young age, but also give them an opportunity to be heard on this issue that they have the most knowledge of and the most feelings towards, it feels like. What got you so excited about these 6 playwrights specifically this volume? And what do you look for when you are getting all these submissions for enough? Like, what is the thing that really catches your eye when people are submitting and they're sending these plays?
yeah, I mean, I think one big thing I want to get across is that we keep the prompt pretty open. Like
Mhm.
it's, confronting the issue of gun violence.
Yeah.
The last thing I want to do, I have plenty of opinions about what should be done and solutions, but the last thing I want to do is impose those on any of
Mhm.
these writers because time and time again, over the 21 plays we've received over the 3 volumes, they've taught me so much about this issue
Yeah.
that I didn't really even consider. We also say, like, look, talking about the issue of gun violence does not mean you have to depict the incident of violence.
Yeah.
So, what are we talking about when we're talking about gun violence? We're talking about people. We're talking about what came before, what comes after. We're talking about its intersection with all sorts of hosts of other issues. What these plays have really taught me is, you can look at gun violence as sort of um, it's like inflammation. It's like a signal that there is another underlying issue at play.
Yeah.
Whether we want to talk about uh, uh, mental health or racial inequality or
Mhm.
all sorts of other things, like there are other root problems that we're not dealing with, and gun
Absolutely.
violence is like the it taken to the extreme. So when we look at the plays, and you talk about your Mount Rushmore, like that's, you know, when we bring together a selection committee, it really is like a Mount Rushmore
Yeah.
of playwrights like David Henry Wong and Lauren Gunderson, and we've had Terrell McCraney and Idris Goodwin and Karen Zacharias. I mean, these are like Sam Hunter. These
Yeah.
are like primo playwrights that are selecting this group, and but because they're so different, they're all coming at it with their own artistic sensibilities and taste.
Mhm.
So when we get together as a selection committee, I really do let them select which 6 plays we do, with the guidance that, like, look, we can't do 6 plays that are all about school shootings.
Yeah, absolutely.
We can't do 6 plays that are just about mass shootings. We also can't do 6 plays that are just about the intersection between gun violence and Black Americans. Like, the goal here is that we pick 6 plays that are in conversation with each other,
Mhm.
so that if my high school that I grew up in South Milwaukee, Wisconsin, were to do the 6 plays, they are encountering stories that may seem familiar, and then they're encountering how gun violence impacts other communities,
Mhm.
and so you get this breadth of perspectives.
Yeah.
So that's, and then, just on a basic level, like, we don't care so much about like formatting and blah blah blah. Like, that's all stuff that we feel
Oh,
like,
yeah.
playwrights can learn, young writers can learn. But we're looking like, does it grab you? Does it emotionally grab you? Is it compelling? Does it open up a perspective for you that you didn't have? I
Yeah.
mean, we haven't been there yet, but if someone were to write a play that was a a play that kind of went in the territory of, preserving gun rights and offered up a compelling counter argument that didn't undermine the idea that, like, look, we want to, I think we can all agree that there's too much gun violence.
Yeah.
But if we had that perspective, that would be really interesting. So we're looking for how these plays, provide something new and are really sparking conversation.
That's awesome. I mean, I feel like in I wanna end it I wanna end this interview by talking about the dialogue and the conversation that these do start. Like, I mean, a lot of our listener base on this show, the scene is educators and high school educators and college educators. And these plays are perfect and I think necessary for like a night of theater in schools all over the country, especially with now having 3 volumes and having so many options with these 21 published plays to like curate a really important special evening of theater. What is like the hopeful outcome of nights of theater across the country using these plays that you've curated to talk about gun violence? What is like your hopeful outcome with this whole project?
Wow, that's a big question,
I know.
Justin. I mean, there's a lot. I mean, like, the story I talk about with South Bend is a great example of, like, I couldn't have conceived of that.
Yeah.
So um, it is almost like, if you create this opportunity, I think what a lot of theater allows us to do is, like, we change the world one room at a time. And
Mhm.
sometimes, that doesn't feel like a whole lot, but if you get a lot of impassioned people in that room that can go out and then have influence in their communities, that's a big deal. And when we do these plays, we are making space to have a conversation in a transparent, open
Yeah.
way, like, takes this issue that is so polarizing. It's so hard to just talk about it without it kind of going to one of the extremes. But we take it
Yeah.
and we say, hey, no, let's have this conversation, but let's talk about it through these plays. What was your experience through these plays? What are you thinking about now that you weren't thinking about 80, 90 minutes ago?
Because there are
And
so many plays that call for dialogue after and like they start conversations after, but this really is a night of theater that begs for dialogue and conversation, not just as you're walking out of the theater, but to be a part of the event, to be a part of the night, and to, like, build on the creation of this piece.
well, and take that conversation that you have in the theater afterwards or on the car ride home and put it into a message to your legislature. Put it into action. I think that's the thing, is like, I want the plays to not, as lovely as it is to have the volumes from play scripts, I don't want them sitting on a shelf somewhere collecting dust.
Mhm.
I want them to be tools to engage in this issue in a different way. So whether it is through performance and whether it's through schools curating, the conversation they want to have,
Mhm.
or they're taking it into their classroom, they're using it as a way to talk about this issue, to talk about how plays are made, or teaching. Like, these things exist as tools in the world. All plays do, but these really are there, and meant to be used. And if they don't result in action outside of that initial performance, that's I think that's ultimately where I hope every encounter with these plays goes, is that you're taking one small action, whether it's donating a little bit of money, calling a representative,
Yeah.
having a conversation with people who didn't come to see the play about what you saw and why it
Yeah.
moved you. All those things are really important.
That's amazing. I feel like I haven't ever read a piece or a book of theater that had called for conversation more than the enough volumes that I've gotten to read. And I think you should be so proud of this project. I cannot wait to see where it goes. I can't wait for the people listening to read volume 3 because really these 6 young playwrights are wonderful and their stuff is so awesome.
Thank you.
And Michael, thank you so much for being on the show.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I love talking about this project. I'm so proud of these playwrights, and yeah, I hope we can move the needle in a positive way.
Absolutely. Well, sweet. Let's move on to the next segment, KJ.